Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Instinct as well as the latest episode of Deception. Like always, if I'm talking about something you don't want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Instinct, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Deception. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Instinct. So, in this week's episode, we deal with the victim in this episode initially is this girl named Maggie. Apparently, she had her heart cut out. But it turns out it's not actually Maggie. It's actually another girl she knew named Amy, who just happened to look like her and was kind of dressed like her. So the killer ended up possibly mistaking her for her. It's kind of interesting because they end up finding out later on that Amy's real name is Beth, and she's kind of she's a grifter, so has all these different identities and stuff like that. And constantly throughout the entire episode, you kind of had Dylan kind of being perplexed. And I think it's kind of nice to kind of get to see that side finally. I feel like we've seen probably bits of it, but I feel like this episode was the first episode we saw how obsessive he can get, where he's just kind of so focused on a case just because of constant wondering of why. It's like, why this, why that? It's like they're no closer to getting any real suspects and stuff like that. So it's just kind of always lingering on his mind. And it seems like that isn't just because of this. It seems like that's always been a part of his mind. Like always, or whether it's just ever since he was a CIA agent. It might be a situation, well, because he was an analyst, so it's probably a situation of he always had the mind for it, kind of what his dad talked about. So he always had the mind for it, like analyzing stuff like that. So it's probably always been like that, being obsessive. He just finds different, outlets for his obsession, essentially. So what was kind of interesting, because obviously Maggie's dad is Frank. He's this wealthy, powerful dude. And I like Dylan constantly being like, yeah, he has a pinky ring. It's like, because it's actually surprised. It's like, oh, I wasn't expecting him to actually be a loving, caring dad. It's like, why? Because he had a pinky ring. It's like, well, what does that matter? I was like, well, he had a pinky ring. Come on, that says so much in itself, which is kind of weird, but okay. I think because when you see him at first, it doesn't seem like he's as sympathetic he is sympathetic towards the dad, but you do see him kind of checking all the, I guess because it's like, oh, this dad's so rich, so obviously he didn't spend enough time with his daughter, so he's very distant. I think that's kind of the idea that Dylan had, but he was actually shocked. But I think that kind of plays into the character's aspect, is that he is a little too overprotective, because we do know that he hired someone to beat Pete up. Now, my immediate thought with that whole situation was, I thought they were kind of interpreting it as the motive behind this was love. I thought Dylan was trying to say that Frank killed, at least hired someone to kill Beth because he found out that she was a grifter. And it's he thought she was trying to play Maggie or steal stuff from her. I thought that was kind of the whole thing, and he just, being the overprotective father he did that because he has the power and resources to do it. Turns out that's not the case at all. It actually is connected to her dad. Apparently her dad is he takes organs and he sells organs on the black market. And one of the guys that worked for him had a daughter, the chef that we saw in the episode. He had a daughter who was in that situation, but rather than giving her the organ that he paid $250,000 for, Frank actually sold it to someone else for more money. And it's so sad because it's like his daughter Riku died a month later after he tried to buy that. And it sucks because it's like Frank has the audacity to show up to his business owner on a weekly, every Friday, and have dinner. And that's so, why would you do that? Because for him, it's just it's just business. It doesn't matter, don't cross business with personal. And that's what this was all about. Personal business, essentially, because that dude's daughter died and he wanted Frank to feel that. So he wanted to take what was precious away from Frank, and that was Maggie. Except he killed Beth because Beth looked quite a bit like Maggie, but obviously he couldn't really tell. He just thought they were the same person, especially because she wore the same clothes, which is so disheartening. That's why he took the heart, because that's symbolism for the heart his daughter wasn't able to get. Because that was what it was all about. So, and it's actually kind of sad because at the end he poisons himself, because the moment he saw Maggie, he realized he didn't kill the right person, and he kind of tried, I guess. He just couldn't live with himself for what he did, so he ends up eating a blowfish, which is poisonous. Not unless I didn't catch it, but it seemed like I don't know if they got him help in time. It doesn't seem like you can with that situation. It's probably already worked its way into a system, so there's nothing they could do about it. Because there was no oh yeah, we got I don't know. because there was no talk about arresting him later on, so I can only interpret that as like, well, the fact of the matter is he sadly died, and it's just a sad situation. And I'm wondering, like, will Frank suffer? I don't remember them really saying, but will Frank suffer any ramifications for what he's doing because of the illegal crap he's doing? I mean, literally all this happened because of him, and I'm curious like what that would mean for Maggie. I mean, would they even bother telling her, explaining the whole situation of why this happened? I feel like they would, but I don't know if it's going to be a situation that they would go out of their way to really explain that. So like I said, it's just kind of a sad turn of events. An innocent, well, it's not like she was innocent, but still kind of an innocent person got caught up in all of this mistaken identity type of situation. And it doesn't make it any better, like that he was trying to kill Maggie, but he killed someone else. It still does. Even if he killed Maggie, it's not like it would make anything better, but in his mind, it like justice would be served. I lost the person that's precious to me and was trying to do the same thing to Frank. But an interesting thing about this too is a combination of many different things. I like that this episode kind of took a look into Dylan and Lizzie's relationship as partners, because obviously, like, it's a little jokey on a lot of parts. Like, obviously, her constantly being like, oh, I'm your boss. Come on, rookie. And he's asking for all this stuff of like, oh, yeah, can I get the permit where I can basically park anywhere? And the lieutenant, like, Jasmine is like, doesn't really answer him. But it's just constantly like who they are kind of butting heads, essentially. Like, they're very two similar yet opposite personalities that constantly clash, which is kind of like, oh, was one of the main reasons why they should be partners, but now it's kind of coming up more of a glaring issue because Lizzie has her way of handling things and Dylan has his. Because Lizzie's a little very by the books and very particular in the sense of how she wants to do things and how things should be handled. Dylan's a little more freeform with it, I think, which obviously causes the issues there. Like I said, it starts off a little jokey, but I think later on it kind of turns into like we seriously need to talk about it. Because even Liz is like, oh, she thought like things with Dylan would be different because she can't really work with a lot of people. So I was like, should I really, maybe things aren't really, like she finds reasons to kind of be bugged about Dylan, but that's something that in the end they both kind of come to realize. It's like, yeah, it's a little bit of our own issues coming together. It's like he has to be a little more respectful of how she wants to run things, but even she's like, I could be a little less bossy, essentially, which is kind of like her thing. It seems like, because like Dylan's like, oh, let me handle the things here, and she doesn't want to ever give him an opportunity, which is like, oh, he's like, oh, I want to be a detective, so like, let me help out. Like, I guess it's just that situation of like, she's so used to handling things on her own because, the last partner she had was Charlie. Is the fact of the matter is, I think she's gotten so used to that when it's having a partner is a little hard for her, especially because of just her own personality. So, like I said, the same thing could be said about Dylan, because that's something that Andy ends up bringing up about like Dylan's whole obsessive nature. The fact of the matter is, because Andy loves him and supports him, but he does realize, like, the fact of the matter is you take on a lot. Like, the fact of the matter is you already had a job as a teacher and an author now, and then on top of that, you're doing this whole crime-solving thing. But the thing is, it's like you didn't talk to me about it. Like, subsequently, since taking the job, you haven't really said anything. But he does kind of break it down later on in his why. It's because he was scared. Because, he was scared that, like, taking his job, like, it's like, oh, he jumped into it because it's so exciting, but he was scared to really talk about it because it's like, what if I get so obsessive, kind of like I was in my previous job? But now it's a situation of like he wants to keep doing this because he enjoys the work, but he needs Andy to be there to kind of anchor him down, kind of be like, okay, snap out of it, like, because even to the point, like, in an episode he was so focused on in case he didn't come eat and stuff like that. So it shows you, like I said, just I like seeing that and learning about that kind of obsessive side of his personality. Like I said, it was just kind of a nice aspect to this episode to kind of really like show more dynamic, more depth to the relationship, that things aren't just, all perfect. Like with any partnership, there's going to be issues where you bump heads a lot. And I thought this was kind of a nice touch and a nice way of handling it, of approaching it. Like I said, it starts off a little jokey, you're like, haha, but then certain conversations come up and you're like, oh, wow, that's I guess this actually legitimately is an issue. I thought it was just going to be jokey all the way through. But I think that's probably like their way of handling things, is being a little jokey. I think that's a lot of people's way of kind of handling a lot of stuff. It's kind of an interesting thing that I really like about Andy, because Andy kind of tells Dylan how things really are, because he's like, yeah, the fact of the matter is you're very smart. Especially, yes, you're very smart when it also comes to like the behavior of people, but you're kind of an idiot when it comes to yourself, because it's like, I'm an expert, and he's like, I'm an expert in behavior when it comes to you, so I think, Andy brings that balance to Dylan, because when Dylan is able to see certain things in other people, he's not, willing or able to kind of, look at it from a different perspective and see like, his stuff kind of coming to the surface. So like I said, I just thought that was kind of an interesting way of handling that. Also, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of a small little detail, but we are finding out that Jasmine is kind of having to go through like some, I guess, fertility treatment type of things because she's getting Lizzie to kind of help her take shots, which I guess is kind of interesting. Well, we can also tell she doesn't have a thing. She's not a big fan of needles, but it's kind of interesting because it's just like a little small detail. Obviously, you can't help but notice and think like, oh, that's going to turn into something. In what shape or form? I don't know. I guess it just kind of gives you a little more context to her character, a little more background, because it's like her and her husband are, well, have they even got married? I know they were planning the wedding, but maybe they haven't like actually gone. I mean, I feel like that'd be a bigger thing. It'd probably be an actual episode within a show. But nevertheless, it's just, I feel like maybe that's supposed to be set up for something in the future. I guess which is kind of the way it is. Like, it's such a small little scene, but I feel like, I don't know, maybe it'll be something. But kind of along the same lines is the other detectives, like obviously the ones that we kind of see from time to time are kind of hazing Dylan and kind of messing with his bicycle in many different, like just moving it at one point, even flattening the front tire, but that doesn't stop him because they're like, oh, how long until he calls like somebody to come pick it up? But it's like, nope, he just like wheelies down the road, which is like super dangerous, but once again, kind of fits with Dylan's personality. It seems like, kind of almost like that thrill seeker aspect to it. But also the fact of the matter is that camaraderie that I really like is the fact is because we have like, they're trying to like cheer up Lizzie because they're trying to do these little things, invite her over and stuff like that to a bar and everything, which Dylan kind of convinces her to go with them, which we see at the end of the episode. So I thought that was kind of a neat thing, which also ties into another story plot point that kind of got brought up this episode by Julian. And that's that basically at some point in time, there was some investigation into that precinct that he's working at because I forgot what it was exactly. It was something smuggling related that like a lot of people were tying into this specific department. Like it might be kind of being funneled through this department. So I think it was like MI6, FBI, like top agencies are looking into this place, and particularly Charlie. And then Charlie all of a sudden just ends up being killed on duty. So it's kind of like, oh, maybe he was dirty. And then it might not be only him. Like the question is, maybe there's other people that are dirty too. Which obviously Dylan doesn't put too much stock in, especially when it comes to Lizzie. He's like, I don't know Lizzie that much, but the fact of the matter, she's already earned my trust. I'm not going to doubt her now. And especially the whole situation of Charlie potentially dirty. That's not a subject he's going to bring up either. It's like she just lost her fiance. He's not going to bring up that bag of worms. But he told Julia not to investigate any further, but I'm pretty sure he's going to. And I think we're found like probably our overarching story because so far it's been very case to case. But I think, well, obviously there are a lot of personal character stories, but I think an overarching just story, not just character driven. I think immediately in my brain to go, well, the fact of the matter is everything's probably pinned to make it look like Charlie was potentially dirty, but what was most likely him dying on duty probably wasn't an accident. It was probably legitimately a hit because he was investigating stuff. He didn't probably let anyone in on it. So that's also another angle to kind of think about. Like some of the people Dylan or Lizzie are getting close to could potentially actually be bad guys. I mean, hell, for all we know, it could be Jasmine who is the bad person too. I mean, I don't want to think that, but it's a possibility that we have to consider. So I'm curious to see how that kind of gets brought up because Julian's kind of working in the private sector. So, which I'm wondering, would he even bother trying to, and it might actually be something that comes up on a case that forces Dylan. I'm curious, is it going to be Dylan going to Julian or would Julian come to Dylan about this information? Would Dylan need to go, okay, something's come up in the case and now I'm wondering about it, like things, maybe some evidence or something goes missing that's related to this whole situation that Charlie was potentially mixed up in. So I don't know, very interesting thing. Like it's still very open-ended. So ultimately, I mean, that probably collide very heavily with Dylan's whole obsessive nature. So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see where that potentially takes us in the future. I don't know if everything else. So I'm very interested to see what goes down in the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Deception. Very interesting episode. This episode deals particularly with this kind of like black art is what it was called. Yeah, basically it's this very like basically against a black background, it makes it look like nothing's there, which is kind of an interesting aspect because it almost looked like when the guy Vince was in Lexi's room, it looked like a vase just floated up and hit him, and then all of a sudden a shadow comes over and kicks him. And even how Lexi got, like, you know, kidnapped in this episode. Which, all of this is so interesting because I was wondering what this was about, because you see Cameron out looking at his window at this big poster of this model, and it's like, oh yeah, because that's Lexi, his ex, which that actress seems so familiar. I don't know what I know her from. I feel like I know her from something. There was like one thing that came to my mind. I was like, is she from that? But I'm not 100% sure. But that actress seems so familiar. I just can't place her. Which I thought was kind of interesting because it kind of played into the element of this episode where, like, Cameron basically was like, oh, the fact is when it comes to magic, you kind of have to try it over and over and over again, practice this like hours and hours on end. And he talks about magic almost being like an obsession. And the fact of the matter is you can be so focused on one thing, you just kind of don't notice when something just disappears. Obviously, that kind of fits very nicely with the whole aspect of deception and stuff like that. But nevertheless, this whole Lexi situation is something that, you know, the team has been down this road before, because Dina, Jordan, and Gunter are doing whatever they can to avoid him finding out about Lexi kind of being in town and stuff like that. So, because apparently it's kind of interesting because it kind of plays into the overall theme of the episode on many different levels. Of the fact of the matter is Jonathan and Cameron were both not very good at when it comes to relationships. In this particular case, Lexi's pissed at him, and kind of one of the reasons why they broke up is because, it's because he always kept secrets. She always had a feeling. What was a big thing is recently she ended up finding out. It's like, oh yeah, actually have a twin brother you never told me about. Even Kay's like, wait, what? You never told her about John? It's like, nope. She literally found out about John when the rest of the world found out about John. Of like, wait, you have a twin brother? Now he's being arrested for what? I don't think they ever explained like how long they were dating either. What other reasons why they broke up, but I think that was a big point of like she had trust issues, which is what Cameron kind of says, but it's like, and everyone else is kind of like, oh yeah. It's like, well, to be fair, it's like you are a magician. Your literal job description is to deceive people, to keep secrets, to keep stuff secret. So it's like not the best setup for a healthy relationship. You know, it's like. There's always, because for a magician, there's always going to be stuff, whether you intentionally do it or not, there's always going to be stuff you hold back just because it's kind of like it's become part of like second nature to you, which is very sad in the long run. But basically, the entire episode, Cam has to work with her new boyfriend, Rafe. He's like part of this like huge business. Because the entire time Cameron's like, oh yeah, like, so, you know, what's up about this Rafe guy? Like, come on, the boyfriend always does it. Oh, it's definitely, the business is connected to the material that was used to kind of commit this kidnapping. Obviously, because my brain went a different route immediately. I was like, with the message that was sent to Rafe and everything, I was like, Lexi's behind this. Oh, don't tell me we're going to have that situation of like, Cameron's going to have to find out, and like, oh, his ex is behind all of this and she's not actually a good person. Turns out that wasn't the case at all. So that's cool. Because I like the whole art of like deception in this episode of how they like fake it. Basically using strings and stuff like. I still don't understand exactly how they operate it, but it was so beautifully done of how they can basically make it. Because the whole thing with the IR bracelet was like it was supposed to be able to kind of attract stuff like almost like magnetically. You can almost like levitate stuff. What's kind of interesting is that the fact is that they were basically using strings as kind of lines to kind of like get things to kind of slide to fake the magnetism and stuff like that. And I still don't know how he did it. Even like with his phone, even throwing it and like pushing it and the guy grabbing it. It's like, how do you do that? Part of me is like, that's so cool. I want to know how. Another part of me is like, I don't want to know. You know, that's kind of magic in general. Like I said, like prior to the show, like I've thought, you know, like obviously I watch stuff with a lot of like real magic, but like deception and just kind of making you look one way and another. I always get trippy about that because I love it. I just think it's such an interesting art. So I never really paid too much attention to like magic in this sense. I do appreciate the show kind of putting it in a very interesting way, especially when kind of associating with crimes and just seeing like, oh, what kind of magic did this person use? What kind of deception did this person use to kind of get away with this? This whole situation is harder for Cameron too because it's like he wants to hate Rafe, but it's like, man, you're actually a good guy. You actually love your girlfriend. You love Lexi, and you do anything for her. And it just makes him, even to the point when they actually save her at the end of the episode, he's about to try and take credit, but he's like, nah, Rafe did it. And it's like you could tell it kills him, especially because Rafe is like, can you tell her I love her? And it's like, he says he loves you. And she's like, tell him I love him too. And it's like, you don't realize how much of a weird situation that puts you in. I wonder, does Rafe even know that the fact of the matter is that that's, I don't think it ever came up in the episode about like Cameron being her ex-boyfriend. That's probably something she never brought up before. I guess it's not something you really want to talk about, especially if things didn't kind of end well. So it's kind of like I had a boyfriend at one point in time. Probably never went into specifics about him. It's kind of interesting too, because Rafe himself had brought up he wanted to be a magician, but he would never had the talent for it. So that's why he kind of got into all this tech stuff, because he wanted to kind of take magic and make it real, essentially. Which ultimately led to the bad guy in this episode, Izzy, one of the main dudes behind making all the stuff that Rafe wants to happen. And it's sad because for him, it's like, the reason why he did all this is because it's like, Rafe has these impossible expectations, stuff that is literally not possible, but because he got his mind set on it and his warped reality, it's like, oh, it's possible. Take all this money, do it, get it done. You didn't do it, you're a freaking idiot. Not the fact is that it might be impossible to do it. So that's what kind of made him commit all of this stuff. So, which is sad, but at the same time, it's kind of like, well, like if you didn't like the environment, you should kind of just quit. But that's what this was all about, because it's like he just wanted to get back at him for all like being a shitty boss, essentially. I also appreciated it when he was kind of like, oh yeah, like when Cameron tells him his like tagline of like, oh yeah, for me, when it comes to my magic shows, I'm always like, there is no impossible, essentially. And he's like, oh, that's good. He's like, yeah, but that's my thing. Don't take my thing. And he's like, okay, you're welcome. Okay. So like I said, it was a nice touch. I also appreciate, like I said, going back to the whole like love situation, that John and Cameron had that conversation, because for Cameron it's like for him it's like love is kind of this weird thing for him, because it's like, oh yeah, I always thought I had love for Dad, but maybe that was just always me pining for his attention and his respect, so it was never really love. And even John's kind of like, because the conversation came up of like, do we, have you ever felt like you found the one and you just let it walk away? Because for them, they spent so much time being this performance, being this thing like magic. It was the thing that they focused on, and it kind of let so much it was their obsession. And like I said, other things kind of fell to the wayside and kind of disappeared. And that's all kind of because of their dad. They even kind of laugh and joke about it, like how their dad kind of basically screwed them up, putting them on this path, so. And it's something they kind of talked about before in the past too, in particular Cameron, like how magic didn't really lead to him having much of a, kind of alluding to him not having much of a social life, essentially. I mean, I guess the argument could be made that's why he put himself so much into magic, is to compensate for the fact is that, he never ever had like a lot of personal connection between him and people growing up. Obviously, maybe he's trying to fill that hole in his heart where like, he never really got any love for his dad. He just wanted his attention and respect. And now he's trying to overcompensate for that by, like, oh, shocking and wowing so many people. I mean, that's a very cynical way of looking at it, but it could be potentially like, there could be some truth to that. I don't know. On came the whole situation with Dina, which we still don't know exactly what went down. We do have that conversation between Mike and Jordan of like, what, like, it's like, oh yeah, so was there a thing between Dina and John? It's like, oh yeah, like they were perfect. They were just kind of like true love, because Jordan's an idiot and like he's the only one that hasn't realized that Mike has feelings for Dina. So he didn't really think much of it. He's just kind of like, oh yeah, saying whatever. He's like, oh yeah, they had true love. Oh, it made us all believe in love. And it's like, well, you don't know exactly what went down. Dina doesn't really like want to talk about it, because she's like, oh, it's weird and it's awkward and it's over. So why? Like I said, because it's interesting, because I guess that plays into why, not necessarily probably why they broke up, but more so what they had, what makes her kind of awkward around him. It's like, oh yeah, because it's like, oh, what is John? He's a friend. I guess it's also because she was in front of Mike and she didn't want to even acknowledge the fact is that they dated at one point in time, because it's like, oh, I brought you here to kind of talk to my ex-boyfriend, which is weird, so, which is kind of interesting considering the fact is Mike really likes John, because I mean, he's just kind of obsessed with Cameron and John, because it's like, oh my god, you guys are so cool. It's like, oh man, Houdini's journal, like, oh man, you got this cipher trying to figure out like all this, the secret coding and stuff like that. Like, it seemed like there was almost like moments of like Mike and John bonding, but Dina's kind of like, oh yeah, let's go. I guess for her it was just kind of too weird, because it's like her two worlds are kind of colliding. Her ex and the guy that she has feelings for right now kind of meeting and talking and stuff. It's just kind of too weird, and she's just awkward and just like, ha ha ha, yeah, that's so kind of. I thought that's kind of adorable, and I love that playing into it, because Gunter seems like, I'm sure like everyone else has. I don't know if Kay has, but definitely like Gunter. I would assume Cameron has too. Well, yeah, because John had asked him. He's like, "Oh yeah, Mike. I met that new guy, Mike." It's like, yeah, and Cam was like, "Yeah, he's a really good guy." It's like, yeah, I bet, So I thought it was kind of pretty neat. But it does seem like Dina and Mike are taking those steps forward because we do see them kind of making out, which is pretty neat. It's like finally, because I could tell for a while that you two have had a thing for each other, but now you see probably one of the reasons why, like she already talked about it like an episode or two back, like her whole like situation not being very, her track record when it comes to relationships aren't really that great. So, like I said, I'm still curious to find out what went down between her and John, and I wonder will John try to do anything to kind of win her back. But it might be that situation of it's too late now, so it's like you missed your opportunity. So for him, it's like, nah, let her and Mike have their chance because it's like he's a good guy. So, oh yeah, right. Something else I kind of thought was kind of interesting. Like Mike had brought it up in the episode. He's like, yeah, hell yeah, I've never actually met John before, and then it started popping in my mind. It's like, Kay's never met him either, has she? Maybe she did in the first episode. I don't remember. I don't think she's ever met him either, which is kind of interesting. He's heard so much about Kay, but she's never actually been to the prison to meet, which is going to be interesting because it's kind of spoilers about something else. Next episode, I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. The fact is, that's going to change, but that's kind of interesting because that will be their first time actually meeting next episode, which is kind of interesting. But I'll kind of get to that in a little bit, so. We never really, I guess that's what that whole situation was about at the end there, like when it came to Izzy, like setting that whole situation up about the tech. I mean, more so, it was more so to embarrass him to make it go like, oh yeah, confront it. Like the fact of the matter is this tech doesn't work and now like you have to push this tech that doesn't work. I guess it was also to make like Rafe see the reality of like this tech doesn't work. And now, like, it almost cost you someone that you love because, like, putting you in an impossible position. Oh, the person you love is in danger, and it causes you need the only way the price for it is to prove tech that doesn't works. So I guess they were just like real military people. Izzy set the whole thing up, but kind of hid the whole fact is that this was all connected to a kidnapping because the kidnapping was kind of separate. So I guess like the whole thing is going to come back to him later on when those guys find out like, oh, the tech doesn't work. So I guess the whole point is to kind of tank his company a little bit. Kind of hit him on both fronts, on both like his personal life and as well as his business life. I guess that was kind of the whole point. So nevertheless, but also in this episode, we do find out from John that the next target of the mysterious woman, which I love that whole thing being so elaborate. Like it's like, oh yeah, there's points inside of her eyes, in her irises on the irises, or is it pupils? It's both. In her eye, basically. I'm blanking. Sorry. And they were all kind of lined up to certain things on a siphon after he kind of broke off a piece of it in anger. Turns out Cameron is actually the next target. And in that very episode, we see all these different people taking pictures of him. I guess it's kind of like a flash mob type of thing of like you're getting so distracted and so blinded over here while something else is happening. So probably why that's all. I mean, it's like, it's the whole art of deception. So it's like maybe during that time, someone knocks him out and drags him away at that time. Like, I wonder, did those people know that he was actually Cameron Black, or did they just not care? Were they just set up to do all of that, like paid and told like, oh yeah, at this point in time, come get him now. Which was also interesting too, because that must mean that they knew his pattern enough to come get him at a specific time too. They knew exactly where to hit him at, I guess would be the most vulnerable place. So whether this is like an outright kidnapping or not, we'll kind of have to wait and see until the next episode to kind of find out like what that's all about. Interestingly enough, they are doing an interesting thing of like the fact of the matter is the next episode is actually going to be on Tuesday, which completely caught me by surprise. So that's interesting. Do note the next episode will actually be on Tuesday. So keep that in mind. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.